Jayne Mansfield's story flickers through Hollywood's memory like a neon sign. Bold, provocative, and impossible to ignore, she emerged into the glare of 1950s Tinseltown with high-wattage aspirations, as though the universe had handpicked her to pick up the bombshell torch from Marilyn Monroe. But if Monroe's public image belied a quiet desperation for privacy, Mansfield's entire approach was the polar opposite. Shy away from the spotlight? Not a chance. For Jayne, every photographer's flashbulb was an invitation to sparkle. Yet beneath the dazzle lay heartbreaking tragedies, self-destructive spirals, and swirling rumors that made her final exit one of Hollywood's most haunting mysteries. Today we're peeling back the layers of that legacy, one filled with blinding ambition, heartbreak, scandal, and a curious mix of pink flamboyance and whispered curses that still captivate decades later. Born Vera Jane Palmer in 1933 in the ordinary environs of Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania, she spent her youngest years in a cozy middle-class household that gave no immediate hint of the Hollywood siren she'd become. Her father, Herbert William Palmer, was a dedicated attorney whom young Jayne adored. She was the quintessential daddy's girl, trailing at his heels, soaking up his attention and dreaming, even at a tender age, of someday becoming a star. In her bedroom, she pinned photos of Hollywood idols alongside crayon-drawn hearts, as though stardom itself could be practiced into reality if she wished hard enough. But her dreams and illusions were abruptly shaken in 1936 when Herbert died of a heart attack. Jayne was only 3, too young to fully grasp the finality of death, yet old enough to realize her world had abruptly dimmed. According to friends and later biographers, Jayne's desperate yearning for male approval, or a father figure, started at the moment Herbert's absence became permanent. That quest would follow her through her teens and well into adulthood. Her mother, Vera, soon remarried. Life moved forward mechanically. But for the little girl who had quietly believed her father would be there to guide her every step, something was forever amiss. Growing older, Jayne found comfort in daydreams and little acts of performance, pageants, local talent shows, or anything that put her center stage. She discovered early on that in the spotlight, the emptiness receded. For a few shining minutes, she could transform into a princess, a starlet, or anything else she chose. By her teenage years, Jayne's ambition glowed like a fuse about to catch fire. She was conventionally pretty, yet if you asked her, the emphasis was always on becoming the kind of star whose face lit up billboards, whose name pulsed in neon. She had an IQ reportedly hovering around 149, spoke multiple languages, and was proficient on the violin, piano, and viola. These attributes would surprise people later when she was dismissed as just another dumb blonde. Jayne recognized even then that the public cherished a certain fantasy. She was as sharp and savvy as they came, but decided that playing up a ditzy persona could be her golden ticket to stardom. In a world that idealized the platinum blonde Bombshell, she would engineer her own brand of mischief and magnetism. At 16, though, she was still just Vera Jane Palmer, a wide-eyed high school girl with dreams too big for the small-town canvas around her. Then came Paul Mansfield, a 20-year-old whose presence seemed to promise stability just when life felt too precarious. The pair eloped in a burst of youthful certainty. Even though Jayne was nowhere near done with high school, the teenage newlywed tried to keep her marriage under wraps, continuing to show up in class like any other teenage girl, but gossip always finds oxygen. Soon, classmates began murmuring. When Jayne discovered she was pregnant, the secret burst wide open. Her mother's reaction was nothing short of fury and heartbreak. Desperate to regain a sense of control, the older Vera threatened to withhold any support. But maternal instincts eventually overruled anger, and she helped organize a modest ceremony, albeit with the uneasy admonishment that Jayne should never again rely on her. In November of 1950, baby Jayne Marie was born. Motherhood, however, did not sedate the fire inside Mansfield. If anything, it lit the fuse faster. She would not be deterred from stardom by diapers and formula. After finishing high school, Jayne and Paul enrolled at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, juggling classes, jobs, and caring for Jayne Marie in a precarious balancing act. "We had a rough time," Mansfield later recalled. She sold photo albums door to door and relied on her mother's occasional help watching the baby. Paul took on a string of odd jobs. They were the archetype of struggling newlyweds, except Jayne had a secret. Her real relationship was with the idea of Hollywood, and that relationship was about to bloom, for better or for worse. When Paul was required to attend ROTC summer camp, Jayne headed west to California, her daughter temporarily in her mother's care, to enroll in drama classes at UCLA. Even if it meant just a few weeks under the California sun, she was one step closer to her dreams, and those dreams were electric. By the time Paul finished his military obligation, Jayne was more determined than ever. She convinced him to move the family to Los Angeles for good. At first, Paul gave in, tempted by the promise of a better life and a happier wife. But soon, the creeping jealousy began. Jayne's effortless ability to turn heads, combined with her enthusiasm for sunbathing in front of gawking neighbors, was driving Paul into fits of possessiveness. He made an arrangement with her. If she could wait out his 2-year tour of duty, then they would go full tilt on her career. If this was a test of loyalty, though, it was already rigged to fail. Mansfield's desire for fame was unstoppable. Shortly after settling in Hollywood, Jayne's real ascension began. She had no illusions about the power of a good scandal or a well-posed photograph. Early on, she enlisted Jim Byron, a former club promoter, to shape her public image. Byron did exactly that, orchestrating publicity stunts that ranged from borderline outrageous to utterly ridiculous. Because, as Jayne would quickly learn, newspapers and magazines crave spectacle. She had the advantage of an hourglass figure that fit 1950s ideals perfectly, and she wasn't shy about flaunting it. While companies like General Electric deemed her too sexy for their advertising campaigns, beauty contests were an easy path to immediate notice, and Mansfield collected an astonishing array of titles. Miss Photo Flash, Miss Cadillac, Cherry Blossom Queen, Queen of the Palm Springs Rodeo. The woman had an unquenchable thirst for crowns and sashes. She even turned down the title Miss Cheese, apparently deciding some offers were a step too far. That unbridled ambition would soon strain her already shaky marriage. By 1955, the tension had boiled over. The idea that Jayne might overshadow him was too much for Paul, who had grown up believing a wife should be a homemaker. He gave her an ultimatum, him or her career. She chose her career. They separated, and he returned to Texas without her. The media coverage of their split focused on Jayne's rumored infidelities, and soon Paul tried to use her racy photo shoots, including her first Playboy spread in 1955, as grounds to claim she was unfit to parent. Yet no court ever found her unfit, and Jayne continued forging ahead, the negative publicity almost fueling her momentum. By the mid-1950s, the goddess of Hollywood was Marilyn Monroe. Platinum hair and voluptuous curves were the currency of fame, and Jayne was only too happy to craft herself as the next big thing. She bleached her dark hair, perfected that breathy, kittenish voice, and was more than willing to endure another Marilyn headlines if it meant actual stardom. "I want to be the ordinary man's conception of what a sexy, obliging, friendly, down-to-earth girlfriend ought to be," she once said in an interview, encapsulating her public persona in one neat soundbite. Mansfield hustled with a single-mindedness that bordered on mania. She landed her first minor film role in a crime drama called Female Jungle in 1955, and that same year she turned heads with her Playboy appearance. But more pivotal was her foray into live theater, particularly her starring role in George Axelrod's Broadway play Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter? That comedic masterpiece satirized the very image Mansfield projected. The glitzy blonde bombshell everyone assumed lacked intelligence or depth. In playing Rita Marlowe, a not-so-subtle spoof of Monroe's persona, Jayne displayed comedic timing and stage presence that left audiences and critics abuzz. Fox executives, eager to cash in on a rising star, purchased the rights to the play and signed her to a 6-year contract. So far, everything was going exactly as Jayne had meticulously envisioned. Critics, however, were brutal. They claimed Mansfield was a synthetic imitation of Monroe, a lampoon gone too far. The comparisons never really vanished. Yet behind the scenes, she was no simple caricature. She actually had the raw intelligence and a surprising comedic talent that set her apart. However, as the 1950s gave way to the 1960s, the fate of the platinum blonde type changed drastically. Marilyn Monroe's sudden death in 1962 cast a long, tragic shadow over the entire Bombshell archetype, and audiences were already shifting toward a new wave of actresses. Jayne, refusing to concede defeat, branched into foreign films, stage shows, and nightclub acts. She was determined to cling to whatever spotlight remained. Still, there was a time in the late 1950s when Jayne truly was everywhere. Movies like The Girl Can't Help It, 1956, placed her at the center of a rock and roll-laced comedy featuring cameo appearances by legendary musicians. She even garnered some critical acclaim in The Wayward Bus, 1957, a John Steinbeck adaptation, which led to a Golden Globe for Most Promising Newcomer. Then came Kiss Them For Me, opposite Cary Grant, and the film version of Will Success Spoil Rock Hunter, both in 1957. By then she was living like a bona fide star, purchasing a sprawling Hollywood mansion decked out in pink, right down to a pink heart-shaped pool, pink fixtures, pink furs, and a pink sports car. She was rewriting the definition of lavish. In that glamorous phase, Jayne married the dashing Mickey Hargitay, a former Mr. Universe who had caught her eye during a nightclub act. Their whirlwind romance was pure Hollywood spectacle. Tabloids breathlessly covered every date, every public display of affection. Together they had 3 children, including Mariska Hargitay, who would later find her own fame on the TV series Law & Order Special Victims Unit. On the surface, it seemed an enviable life: beauty, wealth, fame, and a photogenic family. Inside, however, storms brewed. Jayne still craved more, as though the approval and acclaim she had weren't enough. She was the queen of orchestrating headlines, showing up at events with plunging necklines, ensuring wardrobe malfunctions that practically guaranteed coverage the next day. But as the 1960s dawned, the studios grew tired of the same old routine. Cinema was evolving. Edgier films and new starlets took center stage. Producers weren't quite sure what to do with a star whose persona felt more like a cartoonish bombshell from a previous decade. That's when Mansfield, refusing to fade, turned to stage and cabaret performances, especially in Las Vegas. She took the lead in nights filled with comedic monologues, musical numbers, and cheeky interactions with the audience. She became a fixture in dinner clubs, bringing in consistent crowds. While she was no longer leading major Hollywood pictures, Jayne was still achieving the main thing she wanted: attention. The irony was that behind the rhinestone gowns and dazzling smile, her personal life was in chaos. Her relationship with Mickey Hargitay turned rocky. Rumors of infidelity and arguments about career moves led to separation and divorce. On the horizon, Sam Brody, an attorney-turned-boyfriend, stepped in. Their chemistry was torrid, and their arguments were volcanic. And then, of course, there was the notorious Church of Satan subplot, a bizarre footnote that only added to the gossip swirling around her. According to lore, Jayne's association with Anton LaVey, the founder of the Church of Satan, was partially a publicity stunt, partially a genuine curiosity. Some accounts allege Mansfield wanted to gather material for a potential role. Others suggest an actual fascination with the occult. Either way, stories circulated that LaVey placed a curse on Sam Brody after Brody apparently angered him. Whether you believe in curses or not, the rumor took on a life of its own, especially when tragedy soon befell the couple. By the mid-1960s, Mansfield was trying to reinvent herself. She was still under 35, still possessed of vivacious energy, and still saw herself as the unstoppable star who had once wrestled a contract from the biggest studios in Hollywood. She also made the controversial film Promises, 1963, becoming the first mainstream American actress to appear nude on screen. It generated tabloid mania, but also some backlash. The film was banned in several places, and an outraged public caught glimpses of a new era of censorship battles. Some fans admired her boldness, while others shook their heads, calling it a sad attempt at recapturing her lost stardom. In truth, the increasingly desperate gambits for attention masked deeper issues. Jayne's drinking was said to be out of control at times. She'd show up at events not entirely sober, drawing gossip columnists like sharks to blood. She had a pattern of surrounding herself with questionable influences, people who wanted to exploit her name. And yet she pressed on, performing in low-budget films in Italy, England, or wherever a producer might dangle a paycheck. The public that once adored her was now more fascinated by her personal scandals than her on-screen talent. The final chapters of her life came swiftly and shockingly. In the summer of 1967, Mansfield was performing at a Mississippi nightclub. Eager for the next booking, she was scheduled to appear in New Orleans for another engagement. In the early hours of June 29th, Jayne, Sam Brody, their driver, and 3 of her children piled into a 1966 Buick Electra and headed out on Highway 90. The children slept in the back, while Jayne dozed in the front seat. Out of the darkness, a slow-moving truck emerged ahead of them. The car slammed at high speed into the rear of that vehicle, shearing off the top of the Buick. Mansfield, Brody, and the driver died on impact. The children miraculously survived. News of her death rocketed through the wire services. Papers around the world splashed her name across front pages once again, this time in the context of a gruesome accident. Initial rumors claimed she had been decapitated, though the official report clarified that while she did suffer severe head trauma, the sensationalist image of full decapitation was inaccurate. Regardless, the story stoked the public's morbid fascination. Everyone had an opinion. Some believed it was the rumored satanic curse come true. Others called it the tragic price of a chaotic lifestyle. And still others just mourned the tragic death of a mother whose children were in the back seat. In the aftermath, her funeral was a surreal mixture of sadness and spectacle. Fans gathered to catch a glimpse. Tabloids speculated about everything from curses to conspiracies, and the media machine churned out stories about her final hours. According to some accounts, the Church of Satan connection cast a chilling shadow. LaVey himself claimed he never intended harm toward Jayne, only toward Sam Brody, if at all. Whether or not any curse was real is a matter of speculation. It certainly fueled Mansfield's mystique. In the broader cultural imagination, Jayne's memory left behind a swirl of contradictions. She was at times lampooned as the ultimate superficial starlet. She played up every cliché, from the breathy voice to the shocking pink wardrobes. Yet people who knew her intimately insisted she was kind, whip-smart, and surprisingly grounded off camera. She was a doting mother who somehow juggled the demands of an unpredictable career with raising 5 children from different relationships. She could recite entire Shakespearean soliloquies, then turn around and giggle her way through an exaggerated TV interview. She was every bit the guilty pleasure star in an era that devoured sensational stories. The aftermath of her accident had an unexpected legacy: the development of a safety feature known as the Mansfield bar, a DOT-required underride guard on tractor trailers designed to stop cars from sliding underneath in the event of a rear-end collision. Thus, from tragedy came a concrete effort to reduce highway fatalities. What remains fascinating is how Jayne's story parallels so many old Hollywood cautionary tales: meteoric rise, overshadowing personal demons, and an untimely death. But Mansfield's arc also stands out for how openly she courted that star-making machine, and how relentlessly she pursued fame, often with a wink and a flamboyant flourish. If Monroe's story is one of a tortured star trying to protect her private self, Jayne's is one of an extroverted performer who found tragedy anyway, even as she embraced the limelight with open arms. A look back at her family ties reveals further complexities. Jayne's relationship with her own mother was forever frayed by youthful rebellion and the memory of that furious reaction to Jayne's early pregnancy. Over time, there were periods of cold estrangement and then hesitant reconciliation. In one corner, Jayne insisted on forging her own path, unstoppable and uncompromising. In the other, her mother saw her as a naive girl undone by Hollywood's illusions. Even as Jayne's bank account soared, the emotional distance never quite shrank. In the romantic arena, her unions were similarly star-crossed. With Paul Mansfield, the marriage was doomed from the start. Too many secrets, too much longing for bigger stages. With Mickey Hargitay, there was genuine passion, and for a moment, they were the city's favorite lovebirds. Yet Jayne's restlessness and desire for the next big break eventually eroded their union, replaced by the volatile Sam Brody. Wherever she went, scandal followed. Some attribute her heartbreaks to that missing father figure, an unceasing search for security she never fully found. Meanwhile, her star identity blossomed in an era of transition. The 1950s had wholeheartedly embraced the glam blonde image, but the 1960s introduced cultural revolutions that demanded new idols. Hollywood was testing the waters with more socially conscious films, and directors sought actresses with either classic training or a raw authenticity that parted ways with the polished studio Bombshell. Jayne tried to pivot, taking foreign film roles, stage shows, TV guest spots, anything to prove her versatility. She never quite escaped that comedic sex symbol box. Audiences wanted the teased hair, the sly winks, the comedic purr. They wanted her popping out of skin-tight dresses, feigning innocence. Mansfield knew this routine inside out, but as the decade wore on, the novelty wore thin. Even so, Mansfield had pockets of success and fan devotion. In Vegas, she sold out show after show, captivating audiences with her comedic banter and musical interludes. People would line up to see her because she was fun, flamboyant, and unashamedly campy at a time when many stars still carefully protected their images. Jayne was a pioneer of all publicity is good publicity, earning her a place in pop culture's Hall of Fame. In many ways, she paved the way for future celebrities who would leverage every magazine cover, photo op, and minor scandal into a chance at bigger paychecks. When we discuss Mansfield's final days, the rumors about curses often overshadow a more tangible reality. The breakneck pace she kept, the scramble to remain relevant, the questionable people in her entourage, and a general atmosphere of chaos swirling around her. It's not that Mansfield was doomed by some dark power. It's more likely she was exhausted, perhaps on edge, and often in the company of risk-takers. The night of the crash, they were driving on dark roads, presumably in a rush to make it to the next gig. That haste, combined with poor visibility, spelled disaster. The presence of 3 of her children in the back seat only underscores the heartbreak, though mercifully they survived. News photographs from the crash site remain a disturbing testament to the fragility of life amid the bright illusions of stardom. In the aftermath, the press had a field day. People who had not paid much attention to Mansfield's declining career suddenly fixated on every lurid detail. Some tabloids published graphic images or invented even more gruesome scenarios. The rumored decapitation turned out to be an overblown claim, yet it circulated widely. Others implied the Church of Satan curse was behind the accident, fueling conversation about the unpredictability of playing with dark forces. Facts, rumors, half-truths, they all merged into a swirling mythos around a woman whose life had always been bigger than real life. Mansfield's children carried on her legacy in different ways. Mariska Hargitay, in particular, would become a beloved TV star, winning accolades for her portrayal of a detective who deals with harrowing cases week after week. The irony is that Mariska's fame, though tied in the public mind to her mother, was built on a more sober, grounded image. She stands today as a testament to survival, resilience, and forging one's own path, despite a tragic family history. Yet if Jayne Mansfield were here, one can imagine her theatrically flipping her platinum hair and giving us a knowing grin. She was never meant to fade away quietly. She wanted the Klieg lights, the ticker tape parades, and the adoring crowds. Even her rumored dabbling in the occult was an extension of that unstoppable appetite for novelty, for extremes, for living life in bold font. She once famously said she didn't want to be just a star. She wanted to be a legend. And in a strange twist of fate, that wish might have come true, albeit not in the way she'd hoped. Her death froze her image in time. The tabloids that once poked fun at her superficial antics lionized her as yet another Hollywood beauty taken before her time. Over the years, film historians, pop culture enthusiasts, and fans have continued to dissect every facet of her career, her comedic talents, her self-made brand, her unfulfilled promise, and the final tragedy that left so many unanswered questions. In a crowded pantheon of 1950s sex symbols, Jayne Mansfield stands out. Marilyn Monroe remains the luminous goddess, beloved and tragic. Jayne Mansfield is the brazen bombshell who played the game of publicity with a shameless grin, never missing an opportunity to shock and delight. She embraced her own myth-making with an almost childlike glee, whether that meant stumbling into public feuds with other actresses or orchestrating accidental wardrobe malfunctions at premiere after premiere. If you're going to be a star, you have to shine bright, she seemed to say. She took that mantra to heart. The problem with burning so brightly is that the flame can't always endure. Her story is a cautionary tale for modern celebrities, too, who try to maintain the precarious balance between public appetite for spectacle and the personal toll of living under such intense scrutiny. The more you feed the machine, the more it demands. The gossip that once kept you afloat can drown you when the tide shifts. And shifting tides are the hallmark of Hollywood, where every few years a new wave of fresh faces arrives to upend the star hierarchy. Even decades later, Mansfield's legacy still resonates. Historians find her life a riveting study in how women manipulated and were manipulated by the studio system. Cultural critics see her as an embodiment of the male gaze in mid-century America, a symbol of the era's conflicted attitude about sex and propriety. Fans regard her as a misunderstood comedic talent overshadowed by the Marilyn phenomenon. Occult enthusiasts point to her alleged dabbling in the dark arts. Car safety advocates invoke the Mansfield bar every time they drive behind a tractor trailer. And the rest of the world, if they remember her at all, recall a beautiful blonde with an impossibly curvaceous figure who met a shocking end on a lonely highway. One might wonder if the childlike spark in her never quite went out. Perhaps she was always that little girl who taped pictures of movie stars on her bedroom walls, still convinced that if she clapped hard enough, Tinkerbell would come to life. That quality, equal parts wide-eyed wonder and unshakable ambition, gave her the drive to storm Hollywood. It also may have prevented her from ever finding true stability. She left behind a story that's both exhilarating and heartbreaking. So here we are, decades later, still hooked on her saga. The young bride who refused to be tamed, the starlet who leveraged every trick in the book, the unstoppable publicity machine who soared to the top of marquees and ended on the front page with black-edged photos documenting her tragic fate. Though her career was marked by ups and downs, sensational headlines, and the unkind comparisons to Marilyn, Jayne Mansfield remains an icon in her own right. And perhaps that's the ultimate takeaway. She set out to be someone extraordinary, and she was, though maybe not in the exact way she'd pictured when she daydreamed in her Pennsylvania bedroom. History rarely anoints successors to legends on command. Hollywood is too unpredictable for carefully plotted destinies. But Jayne Mansfield forced the world to notice her anyway. She was unstoppable and at times shockingly vulnerable. So human beneath the platinum hair and the pink palace and the never-ending camera flashes. Her final chapter, marred by that horrific accident, reveals just how ephemeral stardom can be. One moment you're center stage, the next, a blip in a news report. Yet the question remains, would Jayne Mansfield have had it any other way? The woman who once said she wanted every drop of fame imaginable might smile that we're still talking about her, still unearthing the rumors, still chasing the glimmer of her story. In the end, her life was a mesmerizing tangle of fantasy and heartbreak. The same irrepressible verve that catapulted her to the top also propelled her toward controversies and tragedies she couldn't sidestep. And while the bright lights of that era have long since dimmed, her name still ignites curiosity in anyone who stumbles upon a photo of her signature pose or reads about that other blonde who dared to challenge Marilyn's throne. Perhaps the best tribute we can give Jayne Mansfield is to remember her not just as a blonde bombshell or a tabloid fixture, but as a restless soul who believed wholeheartedly in the magic of stardom, a magic that, for a fleeting moment, she wielded with an intoxicating flamboyance all her own. As we reflect on her glamorous rise and mysterious death, let us also consider the deeper echoes. A talented young woman who wanted love and validation so fiercely that she was willing to chase them into the bright, unyielding glare of the Hollywood sun. The tragic irony is that the spectacle she craved was always within reach, yet it never brought her the lasting contentment she sought. Still, for all her missteps, Mansfield remains impossible to forget. She was playful, radiant, maddeningly clever behind that carefully curated facade, and she left a mark that's larger than life. Maybe she never received the fatherly approval she spent her life seeking. Maybe she found fleeting comfort in applause and adoration. But in each flash of the paparazzi's camera, in every tabloidy rumor, and in every retelling of her myth, Jayne Mansfield's legend lives, her spirit shimmering beneath Hollywood's eternal marquee.